Parents fear daughter vanished during recess in 1999. 22 years later, playground monitor finally confessed in 1999. 7-year-old Emma Richardson disappeared without a trace during morning recess at Meadowbrook Elementary School in Portland, Oregon. What investigators discovered 22 years later will leave you speechless. This is the haunting story of Emma, a case that proves that some missing children cases hold secrets darker than anyone imagined, and that the people we trust most with our children can sometimes be the ones we should fear. A pair of tiny purple sneakers sat abandoned next to the monkey bars that April morning. No one saw her leave. No one heard her scream. And the person responsible stood right there, watching the chaos unfold, pretending to help search while hiding the most devastating truth a parent could ever face. April 12, 1999, started like any other Monday at Meadowbrook Elementary. Emma Richardson, a bright 7-year-old girl with freckles across her nose and a gap-toothed smile, had begged her mother Jennifer that morning to let her wear her favorite purple dress to school. It was the dress her grandmother had bought her for her 7th birthday just 3 weeks earlier. Jennifer Richardson would later tell investigators that she almost said no because rain was forecasted, but seeing her daughter's pleading eyes, she relented. That decision would haunt her for over 2 decades. Emma was the middle child in the Richardson family. Her older brother Michael was 9, and her younger sister Sophie was only 4 years old. The family lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood just 8 blocks from Meadowbrook Elementary, close enough that Emma had started walking to school with neighborhood friends that spring. Her father David worked as an accountant downtown, while Jennifer was a part-time nurse at the local hospital, carefully scheduling her shifts around the children's school hours. Teachers described Emma as a curious, empathetic child who loved reading and always volunteered to help younger students. Her 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Patricia Holmes, had written in her progress report just days before the disappearance that Emma was reading at a 4th grade level and showed exceptional kindness to her classmates. She was the kind of child who brought extra snacks to share, who invited the lonely kids to play, who cried when she saw someone being treated unfairly. That Monday morning, Emma arrived at school at 8:15, dropped off by her mother, who was running late for her hospital shift. Jennifer watched through her rearview mirror as Emma ran toward the entrance, her backpack bouncing, her purple dress swirling around her knees. It was the last time Jennifer would see her daughter as a child. The morning passed normally. Emma attended math class, where she correctly solved all her multiplication problems. During reading time, she shared her favorite book about horses with the class. Her best friend Madison sat next to her at lunch, where Emma ate the peanut butter sandwich her mother had packed, drank her juice box, and traded her apple slices for Madison's crackers. Something the girls did every day. At 10:45, the bell rang for morning recess. 300 students poured out onto the playground, a sprawling area with swing sets, climbing structures, basketball courts, and a large grassy field. It was supervised that day by 4 adults, 2 teachers on rotation, 1 parent volunteer, and the playground monitor, 52-year-old Robert Morrison, who had worked at the school for 6 years. Emma ran straight to the monkey bars with Madison and 3 other girls. Witnesses later confirmed seeing Emma laughing and playing, her purple dress bright against the gray April sky. The playground monitor, Robert Morrison, was stationed near the basketball courts, his usual position, wearing his standard school staff jacket and carrying the walkie-talkie. All monitors were required to have. At 11:02, Madison turned around to suggest they play on the swings instead. Emma was gone. The 4 other girls assumed she had gone to the bathroom or to get a drink of water. Children came and went during recess. No one thought anything was wrong. Not yet. At 11:15, the bell rang signaling the end of recess. Students lined up by class. Mrs. Holmes did a head count. Emma Richardson was missing. Mrs. Holmes sent a student to check the bathrooms. Empty. She radioed the office. Within minutes, teachers were searching the building, the gym, the library, the cafeteria, the nurse's office, every classroom. Nothing. At 11:23, Principal Donald Fraser made the decision to lock down the school and call 911. This was no longer a child who had wandered off. This was a potential abduction. The playground monitor, Robert Morrison immediately volunteered to search the perimeter of the school grounds. He took the east side, near the woods that bordered the property. Jennifer Richardson received the phone call at 11:32 while she was checking a patient's vitals. The principal's words were carefully measured but devastating. "Your daughter is missing. We have called the police. Please come to the school immediately." Jennifer's scream echoed through the hospital corridor. She didn't remember the drive to the school. She didn't remember parking. She only remembered running through the front doors and seeing her daughter's purple backpack sitting in the principal's office. David Richardson left his downtown office the moment his wife called. Traffic had never moved so slowly. Every red light felt like an eternity. When he arrived at Meadowbrook Elementary at 12:05, police cars already filled the parking lot. Officers were setting up a command center. Search dogs were being prepared, and his wife was sobbing in the principal's office, clutching their daughter's backpack like it was Emma herself. Portland Police Department responded with full force. Detective Sarah Chun, a 15-year veteran of the department specializing in crimes against children, took lead on the case. She arrived at 12:20 and immediately began interviewing students, staff, and the parent volunteer who had been on playground duty. Every child who had been near the monkey bars was questioned. Every adult who had been on the playground was interviewed. The school's security cameras, limited as they were in 1999, were reviewed. The cameras showed Emma entering the school that morning. They showed her in the hallway between classes, but the playground had no camera coverage, a budget limitation that would become a source of tremendous guilt for the school district. The only cameras that might have captured anything were the ones covering the parking lot and main entrance. Investigators reviewed every frame. No sign of Emma leaving. No suspicious vehicles. Nothing. Detective Chun quickly established a timeline. Emma was last seen by multiple witnesses at the monkey bars at approximately 10:55. The recess bell rang at 11:15. That meant a 20-minute window when Emma Richardson vanished without a trace from a playground, with over 300 children and 4 adults present. It seemed impossible, but it had happened. The school was searched room by room, closet by closet, crawl space by crawl space. Search dogs were brought in and given Emma scent from a sweater in her classroom cubby. The dogs tracked across the playground, circled the monkey bars, then headed toward the east side of the property, near the woods. They lost the scent at the edge of the parking lot. Detective Chun's blood ran cold. This suggested a vehicle. This suggested planning. This suggested Emma had not wandered off. She had been taken. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the story had hit local news. By 6 o'clock, it was statewide. By the 10 o'clock news, it had gone national. A 7-year-old girl in a purple dress had disappeared from a school playground in broad daylight. America was horrified. The phone lines at Portland Police Department lit up with tips, theories, and false sightings. The FBI was called in by the second day. Agent Michael Torres, specializing in child abduction cases, joined Detective Chun's team. Together, they conducted over 200 interviews in the first week. Every registered sex offender within a 50-mile radius was questioned and cleared. Every parent who had been at the school that day was interviewed. Every staff member underwent polygraph testing. The playground monitor, Robert Morrison, took his polygraph on day 4. He passed. Robert Morrison had been a model employee, hired in 1993 as a part-time playground monitor and maintenance assistant. He had never had a complaint filed against him. Teachers liked him. Students waved to him. Parents saw him as a friendly, helpful presence. He was a widower, his wife having died of cancer in 1991. He had no children of his own. He lived alone in a small house, 12 miles from the school. His background check had been clean when he was hired. He had no criminal record. Nothing in his history suggested he was capable of harming a child. During his police interview, Morrison was cooperative and emotional. He told investigators he had been near the basketball courts when Emma disappeared. He had not seen her leave the playground. When the alarm was raised, he had immediately begun searching. He had checked the woods on the east side, the area where the search dogs later lost Emma's scent. He had found nothing. He seemed as devastated as everyone else. The first week became 2 weeks. 2 weeks became a month. The massive search efforts found nothing. Emma's face was on every news channel, every grocery store, bulletin board, every milk carton. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created age progression photos. Psychics called with visions. Conspiracy theorists flooded tip lines, but there were no solid leads, no credible witnesses, no physical evidence. Emma Richardson had simply vanished. The Richardson family was destroyed. Jennifer stopped working. She could not leave the house except to search for Emma or attend vigils. David continued going to his job but functioned like a ghost, staring at spreadsheets without seeing them. 9-year-old Michael became quiet and withdrawn, carrying guilt that he had not walked his sister to school that day. 4-year-old Sophie asked every night when Emma was coming home, and Jennifer had no answer to give her. The community rallied. Volunteers organized daily search parties. Local businesses donated resources. A reward fund was established, eventually reaching $50,000 for information leading to Emma's safe return. Ribbons were tied around trees throughout Portland. Vigils were held weekly, but as spring turned to summer and summer turned to fall, hope began to dim. Detective Chun refused to give up. She worked the case obsessively, often sleeping in her office. She re-interviewed witnesses. She studied similar cases from across the country. She consulted with psychologists about predator behavior. She became convinced of two things. Emma had been taken by someone who knew the school's layout and routine, and Emma had been taken by someone the children would trust enough to follow without resistance or screaming. This realization shifted the investigation. Chun began looking more closely at people with regular access to the school. Not just staff, but delivery drivers, maintenance workers, parent volunteers who came frequently. She created a matrix of who had been on campus on April 12th and who had the opportunity to access the playground during that 20-minute window. 32 names were on that list. Robert Morrison was one of them, but Morrison had passed his polygraph. He had cooperated fully. His house had been searched with his permission, and nothing suspicious had been found. His work schedule placed him on the playground during the disappearance, but dozens of people had been on that playground. Chun could not justify focusing on him without more evidence, so she continued casting a wider net, while Morrison continued working at Meadowbrook Elementary, monitoring playgrounds, trusted by everyone. The first anniversary of Emma's disappearance was marked by a massive candlelight vigil. Over 1,000 people attended. Jennifer Richardson spoke, her voice breaking, begging whoever had taken her daughter to let her come home. She held up Emma's purple dress, cleaned and preserved, and promised she would never stop searching. The image of that grieving mother holding her missing daughter's dress would become one of the most heartbreaking images in Portland's history. But then, 6 months into the investigation, police discovered something that changed everything. A groundskeeper working at Forest Park, 8 miles from Meadowbrook Elementary, found a child's shoe partially buried near a hiking trail. It was purple, size 12, the same brand Emma had been wearing. The shoe was sent to the state crime lab. Soil samples were analyzed. The shoe had been there approximately 6 months, consistent with the timeline of Emma's disappearance. This discovery triggered a massive search of Forest Park, over 5,000 acres of dense woodland. Hundreds of volunteers combed through brush and ravines. Cadaver dogs were deployed, but nothing else was found. Just that one shoe, sitting in the woods like a breadcrumb that led nowhere. The discovery was both hopeful and devastating. It suggested Emma might still be in the Portland area, but it also suggested something darker. Why would her shoe be in the woods? And why only one? Detective Chun studied maps of Forest Park obsessively. She looked at access points. She looked at who lived near the park. She looked at registered sex offenders in the area. And then she noticed something. One of the trails into Forest Park was less than a mile from Robert Morrison's house. It was not the closest access point to where the shoe was found, but it was close enough to be significant. Chun decided to take another look at Morrison. This time, she dug deeper. She contacted his previous employers. She spoke to his neighbors. She learned that Morrison had moved to Portland from Seattle in 1992, just a year before being hired at Meadow. She learned that in Seattle, he had worked at a daycare center until it closed suddenly. Chun requested records from Seattle. What she learned made her stomach turn. The daycare had closed following allegations of inappropriate behavior toward children. No charges had been filed. The owner had quietly let Morrison go and shut down the facility rather than deal with the scandal. Morrison had moved to Portland with a clean record because the incident had never been officially reported. The daycare owner had died in 1995, taking her knowledge to the grave. There was no paper trail. Until now, Chun brought Morrison back in for questioning. This time, he had a lawyer. This time, the friendly cooperation was gone. Morrison denied any inappropriate behavior at the Seattle daycare. He claimed he had been let go due to budget cuts. He denied having anything to do with Emma's disappearance. And without physical evidence linking him to the crime, Chun had to let him go. But she never stopped watching him. Morrison continued working at Meadowbrook Elementary through the end of the school year. Parents began to feel uneasy but had no concrete reason to demand his removal. The school board stood by him, citing his clean record and past policy. Then, in August of 2000, 16 months after Emma's disappearance, Morrison announced he was retiring. He sold his house and moved out of state. Detective Chun tried to prevent this, but she had no legal grounds. Morrison disappeared from Portland, and the trail went cold. Years passed. Emma's case remained open but inactive. Detective Chun retired in 2008, having never solved the case that had consumed her. The Richardson family tried to rebuild their lives. Jennifer returned to nursing part-time. David threw himself into work. Michael graduated high school and went to college, studying criminal justice because of his sister. Sophie grew up with only vague memories of the sister she had lost. But Emma's case never left the public consciousness in Portland. Every April 12th, vigils were held. Local news ran anniversary stories. The reward fund remained active, and Emma's family never stopped hoping for answers, even as those answers seemed less and less likely to ever come. In 2015, 16 years after Emma's disappearance, a new detective was assigned to review cold cases. Detective James Martinez was young, tech-savvy, and believed that modern forensic technology could solve cases that had been impossible to crack in the past. He requested all the files on Emma Richardson's case. There were 37 boxes of evidence, interviews, and reports. Martinez began reading from the beginning. What struck Martinez immediately was how much the investigation had focused on Robert Morrison in the later months, and how frustrated Detective Chun had been by her inability to prove anything. Martinez decided to track down Morrison. It took him 3 months, but he finally located the former playground monitor. Morrison was living in rural Montana under his own name. He was 70 years old now, living on Social Security and a small pension. Martinez flew to Montana to interview him. Morrison agreed to talk, still maintaining his innocence. He seemed like a frail old man now, nothing like the threatening predator Martinez had imagined. Morrison repeated the same story he had told police in 1999. He had seen nothing. He had been on the other side of the playground. He had searched when Emma was reported missing. He had no idea what had happened to her. Martinez left Montana, empty-handed but not convinced. Something about Morrison's demeanor bothered him. Back in Portland, Martinez began using new technology to re-examine old evidence. The purple shoe found in Forest Park was retested using newer DNA analysis methods. Touch DNA, a technique that had not existed in 1999, could extract genetic material from skin cells left on objects. The lab found a partial DNA profile on the inside of the shoe. It was not Emma's. It belonged to an adult male, but there was no match in any database. Martinez needed a comparison sample. He needed Morrison's DNA, but without probable cause, he could not compel Morrison to provide it. So Martinez waited. He kept tabs on Morrison, and he got lucky in 2018 when Morrison was arrested in Montana for a minor offense, public intoxication. As part of that arrest, Montana law required a DNA sample. That sample was entered into the national database. When Martinez got the alert that Morrison's DNA was now in the system, he immediately requested a comparison to the unknown male DNA from Emma's shoe. The wait for results was excruciating. 3 weeks later, the lab called. It was a match. Robert Morris's DNA was on Emma Richardson's shoe. This was the break Martinez had been waiting for. But it was not enough for an arrest. Defense attorneys would argue contamination. Morrison had worked at the school. He could have touched Emma's shoe innocently. Martinez needed more. He needed a confession, or he needed to find Emma. Martinez assembled a team. They obtained warrants to search Morrison's current residence in Montana and to dig up the property of his old house in Portland, which had been sold and resold twice since Morrison left. The Montana search found nothing of immediate value: an old man's modest belongings, old photographs, some books, but the Portland excavation was more promising. In the backyard of Morrison's former property, now owned by a young couple with no knowledge of its history, cadaver dogs alerted. The area was carefully excavated. 3 feet down, investigators found a metal box. Inside were children's items: hair ribbons, small toys, photographs of children from Meadowbrook Elementary taken with a telephoto lens, and a journal. The journal was Morrison's. It detailed his obsession with children, his fantasies, his careful planning, and buried in the middle of the journal was an entry from April 12, 1999. Martinez read it with shaking hands. Morrison had written about watching Emma on the playground, about how she looked in her purple dress, about how easy it had been to lure her away during the chaos of recess, by telling her that her mother was in the parking lot waiting for her because of a family emergency. Emma had trusted him. He was Mr. Morrison, the friendly playground monitor. She had followed him without question. He had walked her to his car, parked near the east side of the property by the woods, exactly where the search dogs had lost her scent. He had driven her to Forest Park, and the journal described what he had done to her there. The words were so disturbing that Martinez had to stop reading multiple times. Morrison wrote that he had buried Emma in a remote area of Forest Park that he had scouted weeks before. He had kept one of her shoes as a trophy, but had thrown it away months later during a moment of panic, worried that police would search his home. He detailed how he had returned to school after disposing of Emma S.'s body, and had participated in the search, had comforted grieving teachers, had watched the Richardson family fall apart, all while carrying his monstrous secret. Martinez knew this journal would be contested in court. Defense attorneys would claim it was fiction, that Morrison was a disturbed old man fantasizing, not confessing. But Martinez also knew that Morrison had written specific details about Emma's clothing, about the time of day, about the route he had taken. Details that only someone who had actually abducted Emma would know. Armed with the journal and the DNA evidence, Martinez returned to Montana in January 2021, 22 years after Emma Richardson had vanished. He brought 2 FBI agents and local Montana police. They arrested Robert Morrison at his home on a cold morning. Morrison was 74 years old now, using a cane, wearing thick glasses. He looked at Martinez and said nothing. During transport to Montana jail to await extradition to Oregon, Morrison finally spoke. He asked Martinez if Emma's family was still alive. Martinez said yes. Morrison nodded slowly. Then he said the words that would finally give the Richardson family closure after 22 years of agonizing uncertainty. He said, "I want to tell you where she is." Morrison directed investigators to a remote section of Forest Park, an area so deep in the woods that the massive searches in 1999 and 2000 had never reached it. The area required a 4-wheel drive vehicle and a 2-mile hike from the nearest trail. Morrison described the location near a distinctive rock formation. He said he had chosen it because he knew it would never be found. A recovery team was assembled. On February 3, 2021, almost 22 years to the day after Emma disappeared, investigators found human remains exactly where Morrison had indicated. The remains were those of a child, wrapped in deteriorated fabric that had once been purple. Dental records confirmed what everyone already knew. Emma Richardson had been found. Jennifer Richardson received the call on a Wednesday afternoon. She was at work, checking a patient's blood pressure. When Detective Martinez asked if she could come to the police station, she knew immediately. After 22 years of waiting, she knew. David left his office. Michael took emergency leave from his job as a public defender in Seattle. Sophie, now 26, and a teacher herself, drove from Eugene, where she lived. The family gathered in the same police station where they had first been told Emma was missing. Detective Martinez told them everything. He showed them the journal entries, though he spared them the most graphic details. He explained about the DNA match. He told them that Emma had been found. He told them that Robert Morrison had been arrested and would be charged with kidnapping, murder, and other crimes. He told them that Morrison would spend whatever years he had left in prison. He told them he was sorry it had taken so long. Jennifer Richardson did not cry at first. She sat in silence, holding her husband's hand, staring at the photograph of her daughter that she still carried in her wallet. The photo showed Emma at 6 years old, smiling with that gap-toothed grin, wearing a birthday hat. Then Jennifer looked at Detective Martinez and asked the question that had tortured her for 22 years. Did she suffer? Martinez chose his words carefully. Based on the journal entries and the forensic evidence, Emma's death had been quick. Morrison had not kept her alive. He had not tortured her for days or weeks. She had been killed that same day, April 12, 1999. Whether that knowledge brought Jennifer comfort or more pain was impossible to say. But at least she finally knew. Robert Morrison was extradited to Oregon in March 2021. He was charged with aggravated murder, kidnapping, and sexual abuse of a minor. Given his age and the overwhelming evidence, his public defender advised him to plead guilty in exchange for life in prison without parole rather than face a trial that could result in the death penalty. Morrison agreed. He would never see freedom again. The guilty plea hearing took place on June 15, 2021. The Richardson family attended. They sat in the front row of the courtroom, facing the man who had destroyed their lives. Morrison was brought in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, looking every bit his 74 years. When the judge asked how he pleaded, Morrison said guilty. Then he asked if he could address the family. Against his attorney's advice, Morrison turned to face the rigid. He said he was sorry. He said he had been sick for a long time, that he had fought his urges for years, that Emma had not been his first victim. He said he had abused children at the Seattle daycare, that he had chosen the job at Meadowbrook specifically to have access to children that he had watched Emma for weeks before finally acting on his impulses that April day. He said he had lived with guilt every day since, that he had almost confessed 1,000 times, that he had kept the journal because some part of him wanted to be caught. He said he knew sorry was not enough, could never be enough, but he said it anyway. Then he turned back to the judge and accepted his sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jennifer Richardson stood up. She walked toward the barrier separating the gallery from the defendant. A bailiff moved to stop her, but she was not approaching Morrison. She simply wanted him to see her face clearly when she spoke. She told him that she forgave him, not for his sake, but for her own. She said she had spent 22 years consumed by rage and grief, and she would not give him one more day of her life. She said Emma had been a beautiful, kind, innocent child who had trusted him, and he had betrayed that trust in the most evil way possible. She said she hoped he lived a very long time in prison, thinking every day about what he had done. Then Jennifer returned to her seat, and the judge dismissed the court. Robert Morrison was led away to begin his life sentence. The Richardson family left the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and supporters. They did not answer questions. They simply wanted to go home. Emma Richardson was laid to rest on July 24, 2021, in a cemetery overlooking the city of Portland. Over 500 people attended the funeral. Her headstone read, Emma Grace Richardson, beloved daughter and sister, taken too soon but never forgotten, 1991 to 1999. The plot next to hers was left empty, reserved for her mother, who said she wanted to be buried next to the daughter she had missed for 22 years. The Meadowbrook Elementary School, still standing, installed a memorial garden in Emma's honor. A bench was placed near where the monkey bars had been, with a plaque that read, "In memory of Emma Richardson and all missing children." The school also completely overhauled its security protocols. Background checks became more thorough. Playground supervision was increased. Cameras now covered every inch of the campus, and employees were required to undergo annual training on recognizing predatory behavior. The case had a ripple effect beyond Portland. Oregon passed Emma's law in 2022, requiring all school employees, including part-time and contract workers, to undergo FBI background checks that included searches in all states where they had previously lived. The law closed the loophole that had allowed Morrison to move from Seattle to Portland with his record effectively erased. Nationally, the case renewed focus on how easily predators could access children through positions of trust. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children used Emma's case in training materials for law enforcement. Child safety advocates used it to push for stronger background check requirements for anyone working with children. For the Richardson family, life continued, forever changed. Jennifer retired from nursing and became an advocate for missing children's families, speaking at conferences and supporting other parents going through similar nightmares. David remained quieter but donated generously to organizations working to prevent child abduction. Michael used his experience as a public defender to specialize in victims' rights cases. And Sophie named her first daughter Emma, ensuring her sister's name would live on. Detective James Martinez received commendations for solving a 22-year-old cold case, but he deflected credit, saying that Detective Sarah Chun had done the real investigative work back in 1999. Martinez tracked down Chun, now 73 and living in retirement in Arizona. He called to tell her that her instincts about Morrison had been correct, that her investigation had laid the groundwork for the eventual arrest. Chun cried on the phone, saying she had thought about Emma Richardson nearly every day since retiring, always wondering if she had missed something. In February 2023, Robert Morrison died in prison from a heart attack. He was 76 years old and had served less than 2 years of his life sentence. Some people felt cheated that he had escaped decades of imprisonment, but the Richardson family released a statement saying they were grateful he could never hurt another child, and they were at peace knowing he had died in prison, not free. The story of Emma Richardson as disappearance and the 22-year journey to justice became the subject of books, documentaries, and podcasts. But for those who had lived through it, Emma was not a true crime story. She was a real little girl who loved reading and horses and wearing purple dresses. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was 7 years old, and she had her whole life ahead of her until a monster stole it away. This case demonstrates the devastating reality of child disappearances and the importance of never giving up hope for answers. While Emma's story ended in tragedy, the persistence of investigators and the strength of her family led to justice, even decades later. Emma's legacy lives on through the law that bears her name, through the memorial garden at her school, and through the continued work to protect children from predators who hide in plain sight. If you found this case as disturbing and heartbreaking as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more missing children cases and true crime stories. Comment below with your thoughts on how we can better protect our children and what red flags parents and schools should watch for. Share this video to spread awareness about child safety and the importance of thorough background checks for anyone working with children. This story reminds us that missing children cases can remain unsolved for decades. But forensic technology advances, dedicated investigators never give up. And sometimes justice, though delayed, does eventually come. Emma Richardson's name will not be forgotten, and her story will continue to inspire stronger protections for the innocent children who trust the adults around them.